Welcome back to the program, top of this third hour this Thursday with you. You're a lovable curmudgeon, Dana Lash here, and you can listen coast to coast all around the country. You can stream the radio program. You can also watch the simulcast of it, YouTube, Facebook, and Channel 347 DirecTV. So without further hesitation, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who just yesterday announced his bid for the highest office in the land, the most powerful position in the world, that of the presidency. And he joins us now via Skype. He's on the campaign trail, has a busy schedule. And I have to say, Governor, I appreciated the Spaces discussion yesterday because it was new. Conservatives have long been wanting for a new means of distribution. It was fun. It sounded like you had fun as well. You probably do more of them.
Yeah, I'd never done it before. And so I was sitting there ready to go. And then they got overwhelmed with so many people trying to join. I think the most they had it was like 100,000 in the past. They had 700,000 in the room, but there were many, many more that were trying to go in. And so I was just kind of waiting for it to happen, that it did. And then we went on and got it done. But I think the fact that Elon and Twitter were involved, for conservatives, that's meaningful because we've seen how big tech has tried to censor our voices. Yeah. Including things I've done as governor during COVID. Google, YouTube took down videos. And so that got a lot of cachet. I think there were a lot of people that probably ended up listening to it or will listen to it in the coming days who may not have followed what I was doing if I did a traditional campaign thing. And so I think we got a lot of play out of it. And if people are able to listen to my positions and be able to talk about things that were debunking some of the corporate media narratives, that's probably going to be very, very positive for us. But we do not need the filter of legacy media for us to run our campaigns. We should speak directly to the American people.
And I think the people appreciate that. So to that point, because I know you're running all around the country, I'm gonna ask you some questions that I know we've heard a lot from just our listeners around the country and just generally American voters. One of the big topics, the debt ceiling. Democrats want to increase taxes. We understand that that's just going to make it worse for everyone else in an inflationary period. If Congress were, if you win the election, you become president of the United States. If Congress defunded the IRS and sent such a bill like that to your desk, number one, would you sign it? And then what would you replace the system with? Are you for like a fair tax, a flat tax? Where do you stand on that?
So the answer is yes. I think the IRS is a corrupt organization. And I think that it's not a friend to the average citizen or taxpayer. And so we need something totally different. I've supported all of the single rate proposals. I think that they all would be a huge improvement over the current system. And I would be welcoming to take this tax system, chuck it out the window and do something that's more favorable to the average folks.
Yeah. Are we ever going to get a wall?
If I'm president, we will, because we'll declare a national emergency on day one. We'll mobilize the military. We'll mobilize resources as that emergency declaration would allow us to do. And we will not take no for an answer. But you got to be willing to do that on day one. You got to be disciplined about it. You got to be just relentless to make sure it gets done. And you've been involved in this space. I've been involved in talking politics and being involved. We've been promised this immigration stuff for decades, that we would finally deal with it. And we've never been able to get it done. This is the time we have to finally get it done. When we had Hurricane Ian come through Southwest Florida, it knocked out 2 major bridges. And the local governments were saying, you're going to be stuck on your islands for 6 months. So they came to me and said, can you fix these local bridges? I got my guys together. I said, dispense with the bureaucracy, red tape, no excuses. Get it done. We did 1 bridge in 3 days. We did the Sanibel Causeway in 2 weeks. And so you just have to be hands-on. You have to hold people accountable, and you can't take no for an answer.
One of the things, and for those listening and not watching the simulcast, we're talking to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, also the candidate for office of the presidency. If you become president, you would be, Governor, the first president, I think, in 30 years to have served your country in uniform in an area of conflict. So you have seen the realities of war. And I'm curious as to how that influences your foreign policy, given that we are in a very precarious position with Russia doing what Russia's doing and even, I think, more urgently, China.
Well, I think just in terms of when you would use force, I think being in Iraq taught me that when I was there in Fallujah, Ramadi, these places, I was attached, signed to SEAL Team 1. We had Marines in the area, Army guys. Whenever there was a military mission about taking out some terrorists, our guys did it, no problem. We could win those fights. But the overall mission in Iraq involved creating a democracy and doing a lot of things that were just outside the capability of a military force. And so what it taught me is, anytime you commit to use force, you have to have a concrete objective in mind, and you have to be willing to go in and achieve that objective cleanly, and then get out. So, for example, like Afghanistan, obviously you go in and take out Al Qaeda and the Taliban. I would not have supported 20 years of nation building. I don't think it worked. I don't think it was something that we were going to be able to do. So that's kind of one component. The other component is just our overall national security posture. China is our number one threat. And we've really built our national security strategy since World War II about Europe being the central focus. And that was understandable when you had the Soviet Union. But now you have a peer competitor in the CCP. Their economy is almost the size of ours. They've built up their military dramatically. And I think unlike during the Cold War, our economy is very much dependent on their economy. I think that's a mistake. I think we need to decouple that, and we need to reshore critical things here. But nevertheless, that's where we find ourselves. So I think the key challenge is going to be, blunting Chinese expansionism and aggressiveness. And I think you do that by having a strong America. And I think when people see that you mean business, you're able to deter threats from actually materializing.
Governor, if you become president, what happens to the governorship in Florida?
Our lieutenant governor would take the reins. Jeanette Nunez, she's done a great job. She's been with us on all these different issues. And so you would see continuity in the governor's office. And regardless of that, I am term limited as governor. So there will be a gubernatorial election in Florida in 2026. And no matter what happens, there will be two candidates on the ballot, not me.
Oh, there you go. I wanted to get your thoughts on, we talked, I know where you stand on the Second Amendment. You've been a very strong Second Amendment governor. There have been previous elected officials who, obviously have different stances on different parts of 2A. I wanted to know your thoughts on the idea of taking the guns first and going through due process second.
That's unconstitutional. And it violates the Second Amendment, but I think even more important, it violates the Fifth Amendment, because they can't take anything from you without due process. It's not just firearms. And so the idea that you're seizing people's property and then promising some due process later, that is wrong. And that's not something that I would support.
Yeah. We're talking to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who's announced his bid for the White House. You had an interview, Governor, just the other day. Some are calling the FBI to be abolished, and you had said that you would not keep Chris Wray as the director. When you look at agencies like the FBI and the public trust is just completely eroded to nothing, can they be trusted again? Can it be rehabilitated? What does that take, in your opinion?
Well, I said we'll have a new leader on day one, and I think that that's important. But I do think you need to clean house much more than just that, because I think that this is an agency that's developed a really toxic culture. I think it's a culture, particularly in their D.C. offices, that have been weaponized against people that think like you and me. And it's sad that that's the case. That is the case. So that's a huge, huge undertaking. But one of the things that I will do, I will go in, and I am not going to accept this canard that they're an independent agency. They're part of the executive branch. The DOJ and FBI answer to the elected president, and I will hold them directly accountable. If they're not going after like BLM rioters, I will call them in the office and I will tell them to do it. And if they don't, they will be fired. You cannot say that they're independent and you can't be involved in it. The reason that they become so powerful is because they haven't been held accountable by anybody.
Right. That's a great point. Last super fast question for you. I know you've got to go. Governor DeSantis, is abortion a federal issue? This is one we've been getting from a lot of listeners.
So I think what Dobbs did was it returned it to the elected representatives. I think some things may be federal, but clearly the states have the primary role in that. And I think one of the fears I have is if Biden wins again in the Democrat sweep, they will try to do a federal law to overrule all of our pro-life legislation in places like Florida, where we did the heartbeat bill, Iowa, where they did the heartbeat bill, and they will mandate abortion on demand all the way up until the moment of birth. And so I think we got to promote a culture of life. I think that there are different levels of government that can be involved in that. But I think at the end of the day, we're going to save more lives with a bottom-up approach.
There you go. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, candidate for president. Governor, I told you yesterday, I'm proud to support you. I've been very, very transparent about that. So I thank you for your time. Thank you for your fight, and we're going to be watching.
Yeah, people can go to rondesantis.com and chip in and help us. We've got a great movement going. Dana, we really appreciate your support. God bless you.
God bless you. Thanks, Governor.